All right, well, welcome to episode 8, season 3. This one is definitely going to be called, you may not know this, you may assume this, you may not care. Those are all valid options. Sometimes I'm like, I think this one's going to be called blah, 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 blah. And then I record the episode and I forget what I said because unlike a professional, because I do this for fun, this is all one. Well, I do the intro for some. Well, back when I had music, when I was like, I think I could use this music over and over again, and then I was like, I don't know if I should. When I had music, I would have kind of an intro and then a cut to that, and so I record the intro at the beginning, and I named this is what I think it'll be, but I do most of the talking with one cut. I don't edit anything, and so you may have noticed that there are things that I'm like, hey, I have two things to say here, and then I only name one of them, and I never get back to the second thing, and you're like, dang, I think the second thing might have been really important, but maybe not, because I didn't ever get back to that. So rarely do I edit. I do try to normalize the volume so that you don't have to. I mean, early days. One of my friends who was a listener, I 100% almost blew the speakers out of her car because she had to turn the music up so loud, and then the voice came on, or vice versa. Like, it was not balanced, and I apologize for that. I am sorry but that was like episode 1 through 5 at most, and then I got some fancier recording equipment. Not terribly fancy, but fancy enough. And so I do all this. That is to say, I'm going to call this episode. It's yeah. I definitely, it's going to be loss, lament, and looking for hope. And I'm going to talk about 3 different influences for me. And I just got back, so you'll hear some of this. Yesterday, my Callie, who's on the podcast sometimes, and I went to a book signing with Tyler Merritt, and I have talked a lot about it. In the early days, I talked a lot about his I Take My Coffee Black, which is an amazing book, and we'll talk a lot about that in a moment again. But it was awesome to be in the same room with about 120 people. Probably I didn't count heads or anything, so I'm not saying that's accurate. But be in that room and to share that experience, and it was just so life giving. It was filled with hope and joy and laughter. And it was such an experience that only the people who were there could have. And I hope in some ways that you guys listening to the podcast view this as something that encourages you, that you'd want to share with friends, or you'd want to share those moments, or just the moments that we have, even though I don't know you have them, because most of you, I don't know who you are listening. Some of you I do. I've learned over the years, now doing 3 years of this, I've learned some people who listen quite regularly, and I thank you for that. Always thank you for that. But yeah, there's about somewhere between 8 to 14 people. And some of you listen to the episode twice because you don't pay attention. So thanks for telling me that too. But anyway, I'm not bitter. I'm just saying. Yeah, it's pretty cool to know that there's 8 to 10, sometimes up to 30 people who listen to these and get some encouragement or enjoyment, or at least use it for noise in the background so you don't have to deal with the voices in your head. And I thank you for that. It does. I don't do this professionally, obviously, but it does mean it's a lot of fun as a hobby, and so I do appreciate that you listen and that you continue to listen. I've always said that if we get to 0 listeners, I will probably stop doing this, but so far we haven't done that yet, so here we are. So yeah, loss, lament, and looking for hope. Season 3, episode 8. As always, you can find me on Facebook /The Unbroken Ground. You can email me at theunbrokenground@gmail.com. And away we go. For those of you that do miss the music, I'm working on a solution. When I say I'm working on a solution, what I mean is that in my head, I have thought about recording just a few like chord strums on my guitar and being like, "Bring done." And I haven't done that yet, but I've thought about it. And so, just know that if you missed the season 2 was really a hard rock kind of thing going on, and if you missed that, that's not coming back unless I get an electric guitar, which is probably not going to happen. But you never know. I so yeah. That's a random thing to chase before we get into the thing that we're going to talk about. Man, I want you to know before we start that the beginning of this is going to seem like a bummer, and sorry for that. It's because I'm going to talk about loss, and that's a heavy emotion. And I'm going to address, we're going to talk about cancer. We're going to talk about losing loved ones, and how we are to react to that. And I'm going to use a couple of different semi-famous people. Some of them are more famous than others. They're not my close friends, but they're people I really enjoy, and people that I think you guys should go and enjoy as well, whether they be musicians or authors or all of the above. Yeah, sorry that this will be a downer at the beginning, but I hope by the end you'll find some encouragement and also some resources and some people to go to seek. So let's start. I think one of the hardest things about loss is that we're never really ever prepared for it. And it's so personal, the way that we deal with it, the way that we deal with grief, the way that we deal with things not working like we think they should. And it takes time, individuals to work through that. It is a very there is like a corporate grieving of things that happen, like a community grieving, when there are things where we're grieved about a school shooting. Like there's like there's like just corporately we grieve, but that corporate grief is not the same as an individual who grieves, and individual grieving really is just a process you work through, and there's just no guide. There's no how-to book. There's no 3 steps and you'll get over this. It's just a lonely place to live and walk through. And God meets us in the grief. I mean, there's if you read scripture at all, if you read the Psalms at all, like if you read Paul, even if you read Jesus, if you read if you read the Gospels, you see that God doesn't hide from grief. He doesn't hide from the reality of the situation that in this world where we'll have trouble, Paul says, we're to mourn with the mourning and to rejoice with the rejoicing, and that's probably going to be something that we continue to do until the day of the Lord returning. And so God doesn't hide from the fact that grief is real and intense, and it lives within us. I mean, if you read to the Psalms, there's Psalms of Lament, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But grief is hard because it is so lonely, and it's something you have to work through almost with yourself, and maybe a counselor, but you still have to do the work on the things that are going on inside of you. And I think God has not brought a ton of grief into my life. I'm not bragging. I'm not being like, oh, I'm so blessed. It's just not something that's happened to me yet. Um, I can freely say that the last 2 years have been super hard. For those who follow along in the journey, about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, Callie started on a health journey that she had some pain in her Achilles heel, and so she went and had surgery on that, and that was much rougher and harder than that. And she actually, I believe, I'm not a doctor and I can't 100% say, but I believe that she, through that process, she was on crutches and she did have a fall, and I think probably strained her shoulder, which eventually would also get surgery on, and possibly strained her labrum in her leg. Maybe those were there before, not, who knows. But so she started there. She had, she had surgery on her calf, and it didn't. And the doctor was like, "This may or may not fix this problem. It's just the thing that we're gonna try." And it didn't really. It's hard to say. It didn't. It wasn't an instant fix for sure. It seems like it didn't work, and the doctor was like, "Yeah, it's the way sometimes it is," which is just a weird beginning to say that. It's made me less hopeful that people who should know answers or should be in charge actually know what they're doing, because the doctor was like, "Nah," and not that way. I mean, gosh, I'm not trying to I'm painted out of the corner like the doctor was like, "Yeah, we don't care. It just didn't." But I think that it was the beginning for me, and this is a little bit of the loss and grief that I can talk about a little bit. But it's just the beginning of me just going like, doctors should know better. I thought we put our trust in them, right? They should know these things, and this isn't like doctors are all in the pocket of big pharma, and they are. That's, I'm not saying like they are. It's not some conspiracy theory. It's just. When you trust people, and I think of doctors as people like, you can tell me, doctor, how to get better, and then there's just a reality that we don't really think about a whole lot until you start going through some of these journeys, is that the doctors only know so much, and it's not that they didn't go to school, and it's not that it's just they do their best because there's a limit to their knowledge. As much as we have learned, and we have learned a whole lot, we have come a long way in about 150 years to 180 years for medicine. Because in the Civil War, they didn't even realize that they shouldn't operate on the same people, the same instruments, and that's how disease was spread and how do you stop infection. They didn't know. They didn't wash their hands in between, and so much of the sterile things that we have, like, those are all good things, and we've learned so much more. We know so much more about the body and how the brain works, and we continue to learn, but we still have a limited knowledge, as good as it's gotten, to keeping people alive longer, to be able to heal so many kinds of diseases, and have so many different types of treatments and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing, but it does have its limits. And so that surgery didn't work, and at the same time, Callie's hip started to her hip labrum. So we found out she had a tear in her labrum, and she got surgery on that. And through some things that we've learned now, that there were a couple of things that probably exasperated that pain, and didn't help. But the surgery on that one seemingly didn't help either. And this time, the doctor was kind of not my favorite type of doctor, but he was like, "Well, I told you, if you don't take it easy, and this might not work, so don't come blame me." He just kind of was like, and this didn't help. I'm done helping you, which was just a hard thing, because it's like, if you're still in pain, you're like, okay, I want some relief, and and I told this story. This is not a new story, so if you've listened before, sorry if I'm going over ground, but I'm just trying to talk about loss, and this is my journey of like, it's not loss like somebody died, but it's just been what's consumed my life and my journey. The last couple of years is just it's been a health journey for Callie, um, and I've been involved in that. And I don't, it doesn't bother me, but it has changed kind of how we do life. Um, and so, yeah, so she had the surgery on the Achilles heel. She had the surgery on her labrum and her leg, her hip, and then she so that would have been like December-ish. I think right around we stayed here in Illinois for Christmas. We didn't go home because Callie was recovering. So December she had that surgery. So December, this is about 2 years ago. Sorry guys, if you're not following along. But December, January, February, March, April, we have Easter, and that's where that's where I had the sweetest, just an awesome time. Um, our church does a deal where you can sign up for a slot in the 24 hours leading up to Easter, and I've done it twice now. 2 Easters that I've had, I've been at Richwoods, and 3 times maybe, yeah, 3 times now, and it is just this. It's awesome to just go and sit and pray and realize that you I mean the time would fly by. I would start praying, and then Callie would like come tap me on the shoulder, and I'd be like, yeah, what's up, like, are you ready to go, like, and because I was like, oh, sometimes she gets bored and wants to leave, and she's like yeah, it's been like an hour, and I was like, oh. And I literally, it didn't feel like that. It felt like time just flew by, just sitting there. But one of the prayers, and this. I mean, you can wrap this into the idea that kind of disillusionment with doctors is also not disillusionment with God, but just with the idea that if you pray enough, if you're good enough, if you have enough faith, then God will bring healing. And so, for my prayer that year, we had this theme of like, Friday's back, but Sunday's coming. This idea that we were all going to have our Sunday, our Easter, our time, like, what can God do? And so my prayer, and this is not new, but continue, sorry. My prayer was that Callie would find healing. And for those of you who know the story, that was April, right around our anniversary, which was May 13th. Callie had to go for an appointment, and we weren't too really freaked out by that. She's had some scares in the past, and so we were just like, oh, this is just another one of those. And then that's when she had to go to another appointment, a second appointment, and at that one, we got test results back on it. That was a Friday. The second appointment was on a Friday. We got test appointments back on a Saturday, and it was like, it didn't say she had cancer, but it was like, this is definitely not cancer. And read between the lines here, right? And I just, that was a Saturday, and I've told people this before, but I didn't go to church on Sunday because I just didn't know how to deal with the fact that my wife now had cancer. And at the time, we look back now and we're like, oh, she had the best, and she really did. And I'm not complaining about that. I'm not gonna lament. I'm not gonna talk about loss for that. But at the time, on that Saturday and Sunday, we didn't know what the outcome would be or what we were looking at. When you hear cancer and you just don't know. people die. People die from cancer. People die from breast cancer. Some people have breast cancer, and then they just keep getting worse. And here I am praying, God, just take the pain away from Callie. It hurts when she walks. She's not finding relief with doctors. And 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, hey, by the way, you have cancer. And that's a hard thing to hear. Even as good as it came out, dealing with the mortality of your body. We just turned 45 this year. I know, young spring chickens, really, but you don't think about it a lot. Death and not being here, all the things that you can imagine. And so I became part of a club. I didn't have cancer, but I was married to someone who did, and I suddenly began to it became like it became more real when people would say, oh, hey, I just found out my wife has cancer. Oh, hey, I found out I have cancer. And it's like, hey, I'm in that club. And it's hard because Callie has had some survivor's remorse, but there's also like this, like, no good explanation. So she's had the test. Genetically, she's not predisposed to it. There's no particular overriding reason why her and not someone else. And it doesn't end. She is in remission, but she still has to do treatment to try to reduce the recurrence. For the next 5 years, she has treatment, and then they'll reevaluate in 5 years. And so we're next 4 years now, because we've just recently made it through a year of that. But she's on medication that has side effects, that truly affects like how her body works, and sometimes the side effects cause pain, and it's but it's like you can't see them working, but you're hoping they are. You got to put your trust in that, and that's hard when you realize the doctors like you're like, all right, doctor, I'm going to do this treatment, and they're like, yeah, this will be like a 33% to keep this from coming back. And it's like, where's the 70, 80, 90%? Where's that treatment? Oh, we don't have that. Yeah. Okay. And there's just some loss, and I start to you start to really, I guess, be empathetic for people who have gone through that or who are going through that. And about that time, like, we rolled around, Callie had the best results that she could have. And then, October rolled around, and my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had a good time, good response and good treatment, and she's doing fine. And about that time, I was on Instagram, and there's a Christian artist who I've followed since I was in high school. He led Breakaway at Texas A&M, and he put out there, hey, my wife's is diagnosed with cancer, and I was just like, man, I just reached out because I was like, wow, sorry. And I know, like I know. And there's the struggle, um I think, is that there isn't a lot of real honest Christian music that deals with, I just found out I had cancer. I mean, there's praise and worship, right? Which is like, oh yeah, you're the way maker. You're working. You'll heal me. You'll. It's not a bad song. We sang it today. I loved it. But there aren't a lot of songs that we regularly sing that speak about loss. We are much more likely to sing about the victory rather than the set and the loss. And it's just a reality. And so, I started to just, I just reached out to Ross King and just was like, hey, I'm sorry. My wife has gone through breast cancer, and I know that there's nothing easy about this. And I was just like, it sucks. And it's like, ugh, I just don't know what to do with this. And, one of my friends I played paintball with, and he had been diagnosed with cancer, and he was going through treatment. And, some of the people that he was in, chemo and radiation, people who were doing treatment at the same time, and some of them didn't make it, and it's just so hard. And you're just like, yeah, I can't get out of the club because now I'm in, loved one with cancer or had cancer. And loss is just so hard. Grief is such a tricky thing to work through. And church can be one of the hardest places to work through that. Some of you might not know this. Some of you might know this. I like to. I haven't done it very much lately, so maybe they'll kick me off eventually. But I write a blog for a Christian website that's just a lot of blogs and all religious, actually, really, I should say. It's not really, I couldn't call it necessarily Christian because it has all kinds of different religions on it. And I wrote a blog one time about, in response to, this has been Uvalde, the school shooting that happened there a couple of years ago. And I wrote that in the face of loss and evil like that, it must be enough that God does not leave us to suffer alone in our grief and our loss. It must be enough that to know that God grieves and hurts too. Because there's just nothing. Where else do you turn? What else do you do? It's enough to know that God sees and cares. It has to be enough. But that doesn't necessarily remove the grief. That just puts us in a place where we know that we can rest in him and come to him with our hurt. And I think that God knows that loss is just hard. Jesus wept because of people are like, well, Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead again. He would have known. So, but yet he still wept. And I think one of the reasons he wept is because he watched his friend Mary just grief-stricken because the fallen world, with all of its diseases, with all of its bad things, had struck down one of his friends whom he cared about, and here was Lazarus' sister, and she was heartbroken, and Jesus wept because he knew how dark the loss was. Loss is dark. Grief is hard. And I don't think that, I think it's okay to bring that to God. I don't think God you can't fake God. You can't fake him out. He knows your heart. So if you're hurting, go to God. Be honest. Sometimes you just need to cry out. Sometimes you just need to just cry out to his face and be like, I don't even know the words to say. It hurts. Help me get through the day, step by step, one step at a time. Loss is hard. But it's a part of life, but it doesn't make, we all know that at some point you're going to lose someone you love. At some point, someone's going to get sick. At some point, someone is going to be in a car accident, or somebody is going to just pass away naturally. You're going to lose people that you love because nobody has of yet has made it out of this thing. We've all died 100%. You're going to lose someone. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. And how do you deal with that? I hope you have a community that will surround you with love and care and support as you work through it, because you have to do the work. You got to work through it. You gotta have the hard conversations with God and with yourself and with a counselor maybe, but you have to do the work. If any of you guys follow Ross King on Instagram or Facebook, you know that his wife passed away a couple of weeks ago. And, he knows he's living in the midst of that loss. And it's hard. There's no words. There's no rhymes. There's no reasons to be able to explain. It's going to be a time of grief and loss, and he's going to just work through that. And man, it's not fair. It affects us all. None of us get to miss it. All of us, at some point or another, will have to deal with loss. But here's why. It's not the only reason. It's just one of those things. you're experiencing people that I know, I care for, um, going through that, and why Ross King? Well, here's why. Maybe he is one of the people that I think that sooner rather than later, but maybe a little bit later, he's going to come out with some music that is his working through grief, and he puts out really good music, and I think it'll be important. Yeah, you won't ever hear it on Christian radio. It'll be way too dark and deep and talking about grief and loss, but it'll still be worth checking out. One of the first CDs I can ever remember listening to. The first one was Three Dog Night, Greatest Hits. But one of the ones that I remember owning, Jesus Freak by DC Talk. But then, when I got my hands on a CD, an album called Sullivan's Flaw by Ross King, and there is a song called the Rest of My Life, and so let's see, I think I may have even stolen this CD from my sister. Not sure on that. That may not be exactly true, but she did go to A&M, and but anyway, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to listen to this." And in my room, sorry for you people who don't understand what I'm about to talk about, but I'm going to tell you about my music setup. So, growing up, I had a tape cassette player that I would listen to music through, a Walkman at times. I also had just a really big one that was a player with a speaker on it, not a jam box, but just a tape cassette player that was kind of rectangular and flat, and you could record over a tape if you had a blank tape, or if you had a regular tape, although you didn't want to do that because then you got rid of the song. But I also had, at one point, an 8-track player in my room. But when about the time that I was a freshman in high school, so, oh man, that would have been 90, 91. No, that's not right. 94, 95. When I was about the time I was a freshman in high school, 94, 95. We, as a family, purchased a it wasn't. It was just a single disc player, and connected that to my sister's. She had a dual cassette stereo radio, not radio, well, it was also radio, but record player that we then connected this CD player to. And when she went to college, she did not take the stereo system with her. And so I and my brother moved into her room because she had the bigger room. I may have complained about this before, but I probably should complain about it now. My sister was the oldest child. And when we moved I was in between the first and second grade. We moved to the town that I then stayed in the whole rest of my life in the same house. But we moved, and my brother and I was in between the first and second grade. My brother was pre-K, kindergarten, and we moved to this house, and one of the rooms, which was smaller, but hold on. I know you think you know where I'm going with this, and I am, but before I say that, I'll give you the buts. But it did have zoo animals and paneling. And if you don't know what paneling is, It's basically wooden wallpaper. So we had this dark brown paneling with white animals, so that relief kind of on there, just in squares, just painted on there. And so it was like, well, that definitely is going to be the boys' room. And so my sister got the other room that didn't have anything on the walls. It did have like a pea green carpet, kind of a puke green, but who cares? But it was bigger, and she got that, and she got to live there in her own room until she graduated. And then when she moved away, my brother and I think a year after she moved away, we moved our stuff into her room, and her room became our room. But just to be, there was a couple of other cool things. The closet had a cubby hole in it that was kind of fun, kind of cool. So, not really complaining too much about we didn't having the smaller room was not bad. We had bunk beds. Most of the time we did stack them, but the one time that I injured my skin and had to get stitches above my eye was when they were both on the ground, and I was doing an army move to jump over the bed and landed between them, and I totally missed and hit my head on the bed frame, the metal bed frame. They were down both on the ground, so we had some time where we were. Some of the time we had bunk beds. Sometimes by the time that we did actually move into the big room, we were both in just regular full-size beds, probably full-size beds. So, and they got rid of those bunk beds and put a regular size beds in for my sister because we all got old and bunk beds weren't working like that anymore. But anyway, I digress. So about that time, my sister's. It was like really the family's, but it stayed in my sister's room because that was the only room it really fit into. But her double cassette tape, radio, record player, stereo system that had an external DVD player, not DVD, CD player attached to it. And there was Sullivan's Flaw, Ross King, The Rest of My Life. Then one of the things that you could do is you could put a song on repeat. I know that's so super easy to do that, but again, when you were going from cassette tapes or 8 tracks to a CD player, putting one song on repeat was actually really, 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 really a step up. The fact that you could skip songs without having to fast forward and hope that you got to the right place. Cassette tapes definitely made you listen to the whole album, the whole artist work. So there's that, that was a benefit of that, but they were hard to navigate. You couldn't just skip ahead. You couldn't just find the song you wanted to listen to. CD, Ross King, Sullivan's Flaw, The Rest of My Life. And I listened to that song because it just, it came out in 1997. It just kind of spoke to my soul. And so, honestly, I didn't really keep up with Ross King that much until every now and then. I mean, like I say, he's a really good musician, and you should listen to his stuff. And that's one of the things I wanted you to say is, if you want someone who will speak about truth and loss and mourning and grief, I'm just telling you that Ross King will. And he'll do it well from a balanced standpoint. And sometimes unbalanced, because losing someone you love is just really hard. But that was one of those albums that I listened to, and listen to and listen to. And that song, it just kind of hit me when I was, I was going through some hard times. High school can be tough. Trying to figure out your life and how you fit in that and where you fit and who you are. It was just one of those albums, and so I recommend going back and listen to it. If you haven't listened to Ross King, Soul of a Flaw, definitely you can find it on Spotify. You should listen to it. I love it. It's got a couple of really great songs. Some of you, if you're like, Ross King sounds familiar, he later, a few years later, put out a song called "Clear the Stage," which is one of his most famous songs about basically getting rid of all the music and all of the show until we learn how to worship God. One of his best, one of his probably most famous, and probably one that's probably pretty apt to listen to today. So if you haven't, I highly recommend that you check him out. Ross King, he's his website. He's got Spotify. He writes from a vulnerable place. He writes, and I know that like in the coming weeks, he's already got some stuff. If you do Patreon stuff, he's got a Patreon where you can listen to some of the stuff that he has been working on. He's got some stuff that'll touch on the subject of grief and loss and all those things. And so keep your eyes open for that. But it's just it's just been so recent, and there's just no words to say, and if you find yourself, dealing with loss, you do just have to lean in to God and who He is, and let that be enough. And, you're not okay. I think that somebody, when I was just trying to process, this whole cancer thing with Callie, and again, she had the best diagnosis and the best prognosis, but like, how do you feel? It's like, I don't even know. It's hard to say. I'm just not okay. I'm just not okay. And it's okay to not be okay. The second word is lament, and it goes a lot with loss. I told you a little bit that I just got back from a book signing by Tyler Merritt, and so somewhere in the story where we find ourselves, Callie, was diagnosed in April, end of April, mid-May, had surgery in June. I started school again in July. My sister was diagnosed with her breast cancer. We went to Texas and for Christmas that year, and so Tyler Merritt, who started kind of showing having his book, he was like, I'm launching a book, and I don't remember. I think I talked about this a long time ago, but let me give you some. If you haven't read I Take My Coffee Black, do yourself a favor and pick up that book and read it. That is about what it's like to experience life as a black man, and some of the ups and downs that he has gone through. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree with every single thing he says in there, or where he lands on some of the things of his beliefs, and but so I'm not endorsing it like, hey, but I am endorsing it as, here's how you can get to know a real human who's experiencing these things in our world and our culture, in America, and how that has affected him. And so I really loved it. I think again, Pathos, I wrote a blog about it. Hey, this is a book that pastors should read, and I still believe that they should read it. But in the meantime, I follow him on, followed him on Instagram, and he's like, oh, hey, putting out a new book. And it's like, I'm in. So launch party, launch team. I put my pre-order in, got all of that going. And got to start reading the pre-release chapters early. And so this is, October, November. Callie's still coming down from the side effects, dealing with some of the medications and side effects of those. And Susan, my sister, is dealing with breast cancer as well. And then I start reading these chapters. And it's like, Merritt has cancer now. You're like, man, I don't know if I want to be on this club. I don't know if I want to be on this team. Surrounded. But one of the things that he talks about in his new book called This Changes Everything, he talks about proximity and being close to people and helping to create that love for another person, that when we can get close and to know people, that it'll make us better at being around them and caring for them, and proximity, and just like, we can make people that we're far from our enemies, but it's hard to make somebody that we live next door to and actually get to know an enemy. And so he talks a lot about that. Loving first, being proactive about reaching out, getting to know your neighbor, getting to know the person that you've been told your entire life that you should hate or not like. And then he writes, This Changes Everything. And I was doing school, so I didn't get a chance to really read it until early March, which was a little bit after it had come out. But I was doing school, so I started reading it because Callie had gone back. She had she'd had two things that were really hurting her toe and her shoulder, and so she decided to get her toe fixed. She had medical problems with that, so she decided to get that fixed over basically spring break. And so I found myself in the hospital again, and I was like, well, this is a great time to read Tyler Merritt's This Changes Everything. And I even began to read that to Callie, and while she was in recovery from her toe surgery, and just mostly because there's just one part in there where he talks about this chalky substance he's got to take to clear out. I was just listening on the way home, this audiobook, and he talks about how this chalky substance talked like it was a charcoal briquette that was rolled around and peed on by 14, rolled in aspirin and peed on by 14 cats, or roughly eating one banana, which Callie hates raw bananas. And so I was like, oh, I got to read this to Callie. Of course, I'm laughing there, and I just started reading it to her. And so she got hooked on his books as well. But one of the things that Tyler talks about in his book is lament, and how we as a culture don't know how to do that. And it's just getting more and more appropriate that we talk about some of these things. Let's go back. I've already talked a little bit about my unfortunate being ousted into the smallest room, and the oldest girl getting the biggest room in my family. I'm not bitter, just saying. That's what happened. You can ask anybody I grew up with. I mean, that would know. But I grew up in Texas, and I grew up actually in rural Texas, small town, about 2,500 people. We were the county seat, And we were what was known. We were we were a dry town, which means you had to drive a mile outside of the city limits to get alcohol, which seems like a bad idea. Seems like a bad idea because then people have to drive to go pick up their alcohol and then drive back with their alcohol. So it seems like a bad idea to make a dry town, but hey, it's the South, and there are still a few dry counties, I think, out there. You can't buy alcohol, so that's why I grew up in this small town, and for my first like 7 or 8 years, I lived in a town outside of Waco, which is now more famous for Chip and Joanna than for the Branch Davidians. And so my wife, who was from Waco, was very happy about that. But I grew up about an hour away. When I first grew up, I was about 20 minutes away from Waco. And so we had a much more diverse racial collection in our community. But when we went to the place where I grew up, from the second grade on, it was, I think, like 97% white, with about 3% Hispanic, or Mexican American, or Asian American, or and one kid who had some dark skin, which is, for me, as a kid, I didn't really know any better. But growing up and then learning things about the place you lived is always fun. But we, in the past, and the reason I bring this up is that one of the things that Tyler talks about in his book for Lament is the story of Emmett Till, which, if you don't know that story, read Tyler's book, or listen to it, and you'll hear that story, and it's heartbreaking and tragic, and the story only happened less than 100 years ago, 1950. I mean, it's not like it's not ancient history, right? But people, like, even today, people are like, oh, I mean, if you look at the news, like, the government is being like, well, we're focusing too much on how bad slavery was. And it's like, can you focus on too much on how bad it was? Because it was pretty terrible. And so we may even be underselling it by saying how bad it was. And then there's like, well, that's ancient history, or that's so long ago. But here's the thing. So I grew up in a town in Texas, in the South, that was known as a sundown town, that had the reputation of that. Now, I don't know, this actually happened. None of this actually, I don't believe, actually happened while I was a resident of this town. But the sundown town in the South was basically, if you were of a different race, you didn't let the sun set on you in that town, or the people would come find you and lynch you in there. And they had a lynching tree and all that kind of stuff, which sounds kind of crazy, because, I was there from, 1988 on, and you're like, 1988 had that kind of reputation? Well, when I was 1980, maybe even before, 1986, I don't know, math is hard, but when I was in junior high, 6th or 7th grade, let me say that, probably 7th grade, my youth minister actually taped a meeting that happened at our courthouse. So that would have been, goodness, what, that would have been like 90, 91, 92, 93, 1993 maybe. Again, math is hard. But 93, yeah, let's say 93. 92, 93. But anyway, he videotaped, because we had camcorders then. Yeah, not on our phones. It had to be a whole separate thing, and then you had to have VHS to have. Again, welcome, kids, to learning about ancient technology with your friend Paul. But anyway, he went to go tape this meeting that was happening, and we had a KKK rally on our courthouse steps, hoods and all. 1993. Um, you know, you're like, what? I hope you're like, what? Because that's like 30 years ago. And that doesn't seem very long. And so when people are like, there's, what do you mean there's racist people out there? There's no white supremacists. There's no, those people are probably still alive and they raised kids, most likely. And hopefully those kids, got some education and didn't have, but that is how recent, people felt safe. I mean, they were in their hoods, so I guess not too safe, to gather in this particularly, not backwards town, but this little small town in the middle of Texas that didn't have much of a representation of melatonin and thought that they'd be welcomed. I don't know if they were, but they thought they would be. And they did have a meeting on the courthouse steps, which is crazy to me. And for my part, growing up in the South, I didn't, and being raised in the family I was raised in, I did not have a particular disdain for anyone of any color. What's crazy, side story, well, we talk about people of any color. When I was a sophomore in high school, there was a kid from Bangs. His name was Coffee Anderson. He was super tall. He could dunk the ball. I grew up in a small town, so you just have to understand that in basketball, if you were 6 foot in our small town, you were a post. You got to play under the basket because you were tall, and I was not 6 foot. But this guy, I think I looked him up the other day because, strangely enough, he popped up on my Snapchat, and I was like, I think I know that guy. We weren't friends. But I played basketball against him and. Had conversations with him, and I think one of the girls from our school even dated him and went to his home, and he was African American, if you hadn't figured that out yet, and she was like, they have like a black Jesus. And that was something so foreign to us sheltered little white people, but he was a cool dude, and now he has had a reality show. He's a country artist. You can look him up. Coffee Anderson. Played basketball against him. He dunked the ball on us. He was taller than any of us from Bangs, Texas. So anyway, but I didn't really. I can remember having the privileged viewpoint of being like, hey, I don't see color. I just see people. And it wasn't until I moved to Illinois and I started to kind of interact with some people not in the South, because the South was still a little bit afraid to really voice their opinions, probably in some ways, and correct me. But there was very much like this idea of well, that's actually kind of offensive, because you say you don't see color, but as a nation, people are still judged by the color of their skin. Today, even. Well, you can say it doesn't exist, but just saying it doesn't exist is not true. Okay? For years, the little town next to the town I grew up in, that had the KKK rally in it, the little town next to it had a coffee shop that was called the Coffee Cup Cafe. And for a time, they had no problems with spelling all of those K's with big letters. And even though cafe is really a C, they put the K there too. And again, now we're talking into the 2000s. And so we haven't really come that far. But all that to say, like lamenting is something that we need to get better at. There are psalms of lament, and I think Tyler Merritt does a great job in his book, This Changes Everything. So I think you should listen to it. I think you should buy it. I think you should go read it. I think you should dive deep into it's hard to listen to at times. Just like when I was listening to, Lincoln, his letters, and like it's hard because it holds a mirror up to the heart and it exposes how dark our history really is, and just sit in the idea of like being heartbroken for the unfairness of life, for the pain of life, for the evil of life that is allowed to exist, the evil that we as people inflict upon one another. It's worth just reading for that. Now, I will say there's some choice language in there. Honestly, it's a man who's honestly dealing with cancer, and you may not like all the things he says, but that's who he is. It's an honest telling of his emotions and how he's feeling and how he's dealing with that. And it's worth listening to and thinking about the idea of lamenting. One of the things that he says in there is he says that his mother's voice is like cocoa butter to the sole of his skin, and I love that because I feel that to my soul, not necessarily my mother's voice, but I feel like there's some music that that I would say is like that. It's just a soothe to my soul, and I really found it by accident, as all good things that come to you should, musically or otherwise. Last, goodness, early December, late November, Callie and I went to go see the Grey Havens in St. Louis. It was October. Never mind. I know when it was Halloween. And I can tell you why. And I probably told the story, but we got caught in a Halloween parade, and we were trying to get to this one restaurant, and then we were like, oh dang, we can't. It's right in the middle of the parade, and we're like, oh, we can't eat there, and we stopped and ate at a bar that was really cheap and had decent enough food. But I'm gonna go see the Grey Havens, who we've seen before. We saw with the Zion Caravan tour, which you should go watch. Yeah, they're coming on tour again, But the person opening it for the Grey Havens that night was named Joel Ansett, and I had never heard of Joel Ansett, but he stood up there with his guitar, just him and his guitar, and he told stories, and he told some of the thoughts behind his music, and I went home and I started listening to his album called Layers, and every single one of his songs, there's a line in one or two of them. There's a line or two lines that just make me like just hit to the core. Like he writes, and it's a whole album. I think it's a whole album about how to find hope. Man, I cannot recommend it enough. Here's the crazy thing, okay? So we saw that. I saw Joel in concert on Halloween, okay? Halloween-ish. I mean, it wasn't exactly Halloween, but close enough, right? So that's when I saw him. And around the New Year's when Spotify Wrapped comes out, where it tells you, who your favorite artists were. And so, from October to the middle of December, so less than a quarter of the year, I listened to Joel Ansett's Layers album so much that it became my number two Spotify artist. So obsessed, soothed, just over and over again. It's just it starts. Man, I don't know. I probably can name most. Starts off with Lost for Now, and it's this imaginary tale or thought of like, what if you didn't know that the sun was going to rise the next day? And the panic that you have when it goes away, and you're like, well, what's happening? Where are you going? And he's really leaning into the idea of like, there are good things in our lives that are going to go away, but they're only lost for now. If you really knew that I think it's the opening line. If you really knew, man, I gotta find this. Sorry for not being prepared. And I'm not sponsored by any of these guys, so I'm not sponsored by anybody. I do this for fun. So take that with a grain of salt or not. This is what he says. It's first the opening line, if you really knew, which is number 2 on his album. He says, "You threw your arms open wide, and I extend my hand." And he's talking to God, right? He's like, God's like, I want to know you. And the whole song is about, God, if you really knew me, would you really want me? And so you can just see like the distance, like the hopelessness of being like, God, I know me, and I don't think I'm worth knowing. And just that God does know us, and yet he does want to know us intimately, and he does want to embrace us, and he doesn't hold back, and yet we often do. Can you imagine, like at church, when you've got the hugger and you hold out your hand, like this is as close as you can get. There's this is the sweetest story. I'm not gonna do all the songs because you just need to listen to it. Okay, go listen to the album Layers, Joel Ansett. I'll try to link stuff in so you can find it. But the sweetest story, there is it takes a long time to wait, is about his son, and he's waiting for friends to come over, and they weren't there on time, and he's like, when will they be here? She's like staring out the window, like, when will they be here? And his mom's like, soon. And he's like, and so he was like, he was like, hey buddy, how you doing? He goes, well, I'm fine. He goes, it just takes a long time to wait. And he writes a whole song about that. And for me, finding hope, it really, it really coincides with patience, with trust, with waiting. Because the fact of the matter is that, like, my timetable is like, I want these things fixed now. And that often is not God's timetable. And it takes a lot to wait. I said I wasn't going to do every song. I could. It's so good. The album is so good. Man, there's a song called Plead. He's just talking about the hurt we carry. The last line is like, or the core or the bridge is tell us the end of the story. Just a reminder that we have hope. Like at the end, we'll be okay. And then already, there's this line. Oh, it hits me. It hits me every time. And I don't have kids, so you can take that with like. So I don't always I don't have the same kind of connections that people have with kids, but he ends the album with this song. And here's some of the lines. It says, and you stare at the night sky and you ask for relief, and he says it's already on its way. The thing you're missing, it's already on its way. And then he skips to this line, and this is the thing that just reminds me of like finding hope is kind of this pursuit. It is this chase after, like, you gotta find it, you gotta seek it, you gotta see it, you gotta live it. It says this. He says, I'll be writing a sad song. My baby daughter starts dancing. I think she knows what music is for. I know I'm missing something. All of us are missing something. And I think it maybe just hits me because I love sad music. I love dark music. I love minor key. I love I loathe the happy go, lucky, happy kind of music that a lot of that fills the coffers of a lot of Christian music. And no, I'm not happy shaming like Frank Forrest, who has all of the miracles and the happy things and all that. And good, we need those too. I'm not saying that, but I just think about that of like, Jesus says, if you want to inherit the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a child. And children dance even to the saddest songs. Like they may not know, but they know how to dance. And they have nothing stops them from dancing because they don't know whether they have rhythm or not, or whether it's embarrassing, but they want to dance. And I think that's how we should chase after hope. I loved being at the book signing with Tyler because we had he told his story, and I already read the book, so I knew most of the story, and I knew most of the jokes he was going to tell. And but he looked out at all of us, and he was like, "You're my hope. You showing up today gives me hope." And one of the things that I've been going last couple of podcasts, I've been going like, what are we doing? What are we doing as a church? What are we doing as a community? What are we supposed to do? Like, how's it supposed to work, right? And one of the things that struck me just being there in this room with all these people is that we had a shared experience that nobody else was ever going to have again. You just could not have that same experience again because of the crazy things that, Tyler said and did and how that worked. And two people showed up late and they got kind of joked on, but not really. And we had that experience of like, there are people who think like you and who hope like you, and they're here. You're not alone. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's what, to me, that's what community and church should be. At the end of the day, people who say, you're not alone. You may be going through grief. You may be going through loss. You may need to lament. But the church should be the place that we are able to work through that the most. And I think it was super powerful, the thing that Tyler said the most impactful was like, you don't even know, but you're somebody's hope. Right now, if you're a breathing, living, relating to people, you are somebody's hope. They see you and they know that things are going to be okay. That tomorrow will be better, and that you'll walk together or just have the strength to get there. And so I want to say that to anybody listening. You may not know it, but I do believe that God has placed you in certain places, and you are someone's hope to keep going, to keep trying, to push harder, to push on, to do all the things that they need to do. Keep shining your light, friends. Dance to the music, even if you don't feel much like dancing sometimes. Sit with the people who grieve. Love them, help them lament, help them work through the loss, and rejoice with those who rejoice. And above all, encourage one another, that they may have, that you may have, that we may have hope. Even in the darkest of times, even in the darkest of days, we have hope. As Joel would say, it's already on its way. Let us not miss out on that. Let us not miss out on it. It's only lost for now. Blessings to you, friends. I hope that this is an encouragement to you. I will try to post links to all the people's things. And, check them out. Support them. Do what you can. Buy their stuff. Joel's going to be in concert here in the Illinois area and the all around. Actually, he's going on a concert right now. I highly recommend it. Try and get there. Tyler Merritt is touring with his book tour. Highly recommend trying to go to one of those. If he was doing another one close to us, Callie and I would probably go again. But thanks for listening. Keep an eye out for Ross King. He's going to be releasing some stuff that's probably going to hit pretty hard. And if you're in a grief place, then they might find that a place that sends a voice up for your grief, as good artists do. Good artists, good writers, good singers, good songwriters, they do that. So let's use those gifts that allow them to balm our soul. Blessings, you guys.